guys. Sorry I couldn't make it in with you this morning, but I'd say 3 out of 4 kids are sick. 2 of them had the fevers that keep them out of going to their respective schools. So it's my turn. So I'm home today with those guys. But I'm making a video of this. Sorry I can't. It's not the ideal, but it's a way for me to have the calculator and your review notes. So if you don't have them out yet, want to grab those. It's a way for me to finish those up with you and use the calculator at the same time. I'll make several other videos for you guys that are available to you today, and you can watch those. And I'm writing over top of the notes that you guys have or will have in your hands here shortly. So be patient. Hey, ask if you want to see it again, just say pause and rewind, because you can do that with videos. You can also watch it off of Google Classroom. I'll load up a link to the playlist of these videos for today. Okay, so let's get started. The stuff we did yesterday was finding this is the graph from yesterday. Remember we graphed the left and right hand side of an equation, x squared plus 9x equals 32, and then we kind of fit the window, made it a little bit more to the left. We used a Zoom 6 standard window. Zoom is the button that gets you kind of your standard looking screens, and then we played with it so that it would fit. So we went a little more to the left, negative 30 for my minimum on the left, and positive 50 for my maximum y. So made it more vertically open so I could see this graph. And then we found these intersections. With the second trace, we accessed all these calculation options under the graph menu, and we found intersect. And it said first graph, second graph, guess, or first curve, second curve, guess. You hit enter each time. And we found the intersections, and they matched our actual quadratic formula version of it as well. So this is just a way of solving an equation. You can always just graph both sides of the equal sign and then find the intersections. And that was yesterday. Now today, we're going to take and graph this new function r of t, and I have it over here. We're just going to erase what I had in there yesterday. Just hit clear. We'll wipe out whatever was on those lines, the two y1 and y2s. I'm going to type in the 2443 plus, and then we don't have a t. It says t here on your variable. That's for parametrics, and we're not going to get into that just yet. But we're going to 2443 plus 20.4, and what you want to put in instead of t is your x. Oops, probably a 20.4 would be good. So pardon my typing on this. It's not as helpful to use my calculator on here. It bogs down a little bit. And then plus 20.8 t squared. So hopefully it cooperates. 20.8, and then you can do x squared. And just write along with me. So I'll do it in real time. That way you guys usually have a better chance of keeping up and being ahead of me, as you often are. And then x to that, and then you have just the caret symbol, the little up arrow to do that third power, and then you have to go right arrow to get out of that option. Hopefully I typed it correct. If not, make some kind of statement and we'll clarify. And you'll have to tell me on Monday. If there's errors at all today, you have to tell me about it on Monday. Now, I'm going to put this graph in, and then if I want to get a window that's friendly, I start with Zoom 6, like a standard window, and in this one it doesn't fit. And I'm going to give you tools for, hey, what if I just use a standard? So Zoom gives me some standard window options. Zoom 6 is a 10 left, right, up, and down window. If you hit enter, you'll notice, hey, I can't see any of my graph. And that's kind of part of this exercise, graph with a friendly window. So one thing you can do is, just knowing that this graph exists somewhere, putting in a 0 for x, or t in this case, will give you at least one number, and you'll realize that, man, the screen's not even close. So think about it. If I put in 0 wherever there's a t, that means everything's zeroed out except for 2,443. So when you put in 0, you get out 2,443. That means this graph is on the y-axis. Putting in x equals 0, I'm way up at 2,443. That means my windows, y maximum, isn't even close to big enough. So I'm going to go down here, and you want to overshoot it, because you don't want to just put in the maximum 2443. You might still miss the graph. So I'm going to go all the way to 3,000 as my y maximum, and that should at least let me see one point on that graph. And then what we do is just kind of open our purview up. We just expand out until we start seeing stuff of interest. So I'm going to hit enter. Actually, enter will just do a carriage return, but if you want to see the graph, you actually hit the graph button. After adjusting your window, then you got to go to graph. So here goes. Yes, I see some of my graph. And actually, that's, if you remember anything about cubic functions, we're seeing quite a bit of it. So that's the other part of this semester, is we talk a lot about basic functions, so that when you see a little bit of it in a window like this, then you realize you either have all of it or you expect to see more and you need to open your window up. So let's go with it. That's a pretty good start. It looks like maybe I could just go a little bit to the right, maybe see the x-intercept, and I don't know, I think we're good as other than that. So in my window, I might make my x max, which would open up that right-hand side, I might make that a little bit bigger. And so that's my plan. Instead of 10, I'll probably go with 20 and see what that looks like, and then hit graph just to see how it goes. There we go. So there's more of my graph. So the next piece is, would you, the whole problem is related to number of country radio stations. It's a funny way to word this. Radio stations operating with a country format. And there's an approximation of how many there are. And this is t equals 0, like the beginning is in 1990. And then years after that are like R of 2. We're going to find out what does R of 2 mean. And you can actually jot this down if you like. It means when T is 2, which is 1992, it means the number of country radio stations in 1992. And you want to jot that down and then kind of ponder through that, because interpreting functions is actually one of our big skills too to walk away with in this class, is saying if this is representing the number of country radio stations, what does it mean to put 2 in for T? And it means the year 1992, there are this many approximately country radio stations. And we can actually find that value. But we want a graph-friendly window, and if you look over, you want to jot those down. But what we did is started with a standard window, and then I put in a single value. I put 0 in, so essentially I put in R of 0. And I didn't do it on a piece of paper, I didn't do anything, I just put it in mentally. Because putting in 0 is finding, remember, the y-intercept? I think we talked about that briefly yesterday. If you put in x equals 0, or in this case t equals 0, everything zeroes out except for this little value right here, and you get out 2,443, and that was our y-intercept, where it crossed right here. And that's a big deal, because there's a lot of information when you put in 0 for x. That gave us a nice sense of where our window is, how big to make it vertically. And then we saw that we were missing a little bit of the right-hand side of the graph when we did that, and we opened up the x max just a little bit so that we could see more of it. So this is it's a window that's friendly. And if you want to jot down those values in here, and any notes to yourself on kind of how that happened, this, by the way, is traditionally, some people say, oh, it's really simple, and there's many others that when it comes to technology, it just doesn't resonate with them, so they're confused by it. So you want to jot down as much as you can, ask some questions of others, and me, of course, when I get back, but definitely talk to your friends who are doing it successfully. And then R of 2, this is the meaning is the how many country radio stations in good old 1992. And I also want to show you how you can actually find that as well. We can get R of 2. I'm going to show you one more thing on your calculator that I want you to fix for the foreseeable future. There's a setting I want you to adjust. Okay, so let's check out your graph one more time. Make sure you get the window. Take a peek at that. That's what it looks like, and this is the window I chose, just with some kind of intuitive putting in 0 for t and just looking at the graph. Okay. Now, what's the greatest number of radio stations and what does R of 2 mean? These are the two things I'm going to address in just a moment. I'm going to have you guys set a table up. So in all our graph options, which are all these buttons here, table, second graph, gives you into the table region. And if you notice, yours might have numbers in it already, and it's spitting out values for y1. That's great, but it may not as well. It may be empty. So everybody's could be different. This is going up 0, 1 through going up by 1s onto 10. I think it just keeps going. But there's a way to set the table settings, and it's right above window here. So if you do second and window, the table settings are in there. I'd like you to set it differently than what I have here, which is probably what most of us have. Something with, it's on auto and auto for independent and dependent. Independent would be X, dependent would be Y. Input, output. And if you go down, I want you to put ask for independent. Not leave dependent auto, but I want you to make ask for independent. So you hit enter and leave this for the foreseeable future, because it makes your table pretty useful throughout the rest of the semester. Now when we go back, we're done, so you don't need to do anything. We're going to go back to the table, which is second graph. It's that blue button right up there. So second graph, and you'll notice it's empty until you start typing in numbers, like 2, for instance. So when I put in 2, that's actually taking 2 and it's putting it in the function I have stored in y1, and that, by the way, is our r of t function. Remember, I typed that in there. So this is r of 2. So R2 means the number of radio stations in 1992, and it is by the model. By the way, this graph is a predicting model. It's not exact, but it's giving us a ballpark figure. It's saying, yeah, there's about 2,537 country radio stations in 1992. Okay. Now the next question is, hey, where's the maximum, the greatest number of radio stations operated? So we'll go back to the graph. I'm going to show you one other option for the same thing I just did. If you guys go to second trace and go to the calc functions, that's, remember we found yesterday, that's how we found the intersection on the graph. Well, it does a lot of other stuff too. So second trace, you can find this maximum because it says in part C, what's the greatest number of radio stations? So if I go down to maximum, you can actually find this place where there's the greatest number of radio stations. And it has this funny, there's instructions, there's a cursor on your graph. It says left bound. It means put a little boundary to the left of where you think the maximum is. Now, if you guys are reading this graph like you should left to right, I bet your intuition's telling you the greatest number of radio stations must have happened like here at the peak, and you'd be right. It's to find the greatest number of something in a graph is where you're finding a high point. So left bound, you hit enter. Okay, you want to get left of the peak significantly, enough left that you know you're not at the peak itself. And right bound is right here. Cool thing about the newer calculators, if you have one of these, is it makes boundaries very visible. The old ones don't. They just put these little triangle kind of corners, and sometimes it's hard to tell. But that's definitely encapsulating. Those are the two bounds around that. Guess is not terribly important, but you can get reasonably close and hit enter, and you get a maximum. And the maximum has two components, right? X and Y. X, of course, is the year. This 4.13 would be 94, and 2,617 radio stations. So it says when was the greatest number of radio stations in the country format, and you'd say like 1994, roughly, because that X max. The X at the maximum represents the year. Wish I could make a T for you guys, but I can't. Is about 1994. The other question, part B, you can actually have found R of 2 that we did in the table. You can do it under that calc menu as well. So if you go second trace and you go to value right there, that very first option is another way to, if it's in the window, this only works if the graph for things that you can see in the picture, but at x equals 2, you can hit 2 and hit enter, and it will tell you that it's 2,000, and it'll actually put the cursor right on x equals 2. Same value, 2,537. So it's another way to do it. So this is your part 1. I'll do number 7 with you guys, the regression. If you've had stats before, then most of us haven't, and you want to wait till Monday, and I'll go through that with you live. But let's keep moving. I'm going to get next to solving, factoring quadratics and solving quadratics so that you have fuel to finish your entire note packet, should you choose, over the weekend. And also have resources to finishing up your My Math Lab homework. Take care. See you guys on Monday.